Thank you very much. The last question goes to Bloomberg News, please.
Thank you. I'm Margaret Talev with Bloomberg News. Mr. President, you're here, of course, to talk about Asia, but much of the world's attention and yours is also being diverted back to the Middle East now and the situation in Gaza. You're calling for a de-escalation of the violence between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I'd like to ask you, do you believe that a movement of Israeli ground troops into Gaza would be an escalation, and do you support such a move anyhow? And are you concerned that the Arab Spring, at least in the near term, has made matters worse? And does the violence there complicate your pivot to Asia? And Madam Prime Minister, you may know the President's first visit today was to the Royal Monastery, where he told a monk that he will need a lot of prayer to help the U.S. avoid a fiscal crisis. It was sort of a joke, kind of, right? What can emerging democracies in Asia take away from how difficult it has been for the President to get Congress to agree to budget negotiations with him, and why shouldn't China's system of government look more appealing in this region when you confront a situation like this in the U.S.? Thank you.
Well, let me start with Gaza. Let's understand what the precipitating event here was that's causing the current crisis. And that was an ever-escalating number of missiles that were landing not just in Israeli territory, but in areas that are populated. And there's no country on earth that would tolerate missiles raining down on its citizens from outside its borders. So we are fully supportive of Israel's right to defend itself from missiles landing on people's homes and workplaces and potentially killing civilians. And we will continue to support Israel's right to defend itself. Now, what is also true is that we are actively working with all the parties in the region to see if we can end those missiles being fired without further escalation of violence in the region. And so I've had several conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I've had several conversations with President Morsi of Egypt. I've spoken to Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey, who was visiting Egypt right in the midst of what was happening in Gaza. And my message to all of them was that Israel has every right to expect that it does not have missiles fired into its territory. If that can be accomplished without a ramping up of military activity in Gaza, that's preferable. That's not just preferable for the people of Gaza, it's also preferable for Israelis, because if Israeli troops are in Gaza, they're much more at risk of incurring fatalities or being wounded. We're going to have to see what kind of progress we can make in the next 24, 36, 48 hours. But what I've said to President Morsi and Prime Minister Erdogan is that those who champion the cause of the Palestinians should recognize that if we see a further escalation of the situation in Gaza, then the likelihood of us getting back on any kind of peace track that leads to a two-state solution is going to be pushed off way into the future. And so if we're serious about wanting to resolve this situation and create a genuine peace process, it starts with no more missiles being fired into Israel's territory. And that then gives us the space to try to deal with these long-standing conflicts that exist. In terms of the impact of the Arab Spring, let's just remember that the exact same situation arose just a couple of years ago before the Arab Spring. So I don't think anybody would suggest somehow that it's unique to democratization in the region, that there's a conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. That's been going on for several decades now. I do think that as Egyptians, Tunisians, others have more of a voice in their government, it becomes more important for all the players, including the United States, to speak directly to those populations and to deliver a message that peace is preferable to war, that this is an issue that can be resolved if parties are willing to sit down and negotiate directly, that violence is not an answer, and that there are no shortcuts to the hard work of trying to bring about what I think is the best option, two states living side by side in peace and security. And that's a message that you can't just direct at a single figure in these Arab countries. Now you've got to be able to deliver that message across the board, and that will probably be a little bit harder. But the truth is that for any peace that was going to last, that was going to be necessary anyway. Last point, I know it wasn't directed at me, it was directed at the Prime Minister, but I'm just going to make this point. First of all, I always believe in prayer. I believe in prayer when I go to church back home, and if a Buddhist monk is wishing me well, I'm going to take whatever good vibes he can give me to try to deal with some challenges back home. I'm confident that we can get our fiscal situation dealt with. And I think it's important to recognize that, yeah, democracy is a little messier than alternative systems of government, but that's because democracy allows everybody to have a voice. And that system of government lasts, and it's legitimate. And when agreements are finally struck, you know that nobody's being left out of the conversation. And that's the reason for our stability and our prosperity. And the notion somehow that you can take shortcuts and avoid democracy, and that somehow is going to be the mechanism whereby you deliver economic growth, I think is absolutely false. I think over time, when you look at the most prosperous nations on this earth, they are the ones in which every individual, every citizen feels like if they put in the effort, if they're working hard, that those efforts bear fruit, that a government respects them and observes rule of law and doesn't take their property without due process, and they don't have to pay a bribe to start a business or get a telephone installed. And you know, it's worked for us for over 200 years now, and I think it's going to work for Thailand, and it's going to work for this entire region. And the alternative, I think, is a false hope that over time, I think, erodes and collapses under the weight of people whose aspirations are not being met. I know you didn't direct that question at me, but I just wanted to make sure. Prime Minister didn't get put on the spot without me having something to say about that. All right?
Yeah, for my answer, I think talk about the basic of the economic growth. I think we still believe that from my statement said that the democracy will be the fundamental. I think this is still valid, but this is the one way of the basic of the fundamental, because as long as you have the stability in the political, so it will be the stability of economic. But anyway, in the economic, will be have to understand the cause and the root cause of the problem in the right way to solve the problem. And also that as long as you work with stick with the principle of the financial, but along the way you need to balance of the growth of the economy, because I think still have any place on the blue ocean, so we can find, as long as if we find the right place at the right time, so the growth still going. So I think I believe like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Just a final program note, the joint press statement in English and unofficial translation in Thai will be circulated shortly. So we thank you for your cooperation. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam Prime Minister. This concludes the joint press conference. And please be seated.
There's the President Obama and the Prime Minister of Thailand there at the press conference, just wrapping up about 40, 45 minutes or so. It touched on everything from Thai food that the President was going to eat at dinner to what's going on in Israel. That question, of course, came up, and also human rights abuses in and around the Asian region as well.
Two real observations from the folks on Twitter this morning, and one is the relative attractiveness of the Prime Minister of Thailand, another being the President's thoughts on Thai food. I mean, that is going deep, but that is speaking my language.
But she was also very smart, and the President complimented her on her English.
She spoke. English. She came out and spoke first in English, and the President was saying, I can't try that. I'm not going to speak in Thai. But anyway, let's go to Wendell Goller, who's traveling with the President right now in Bangkok. Some takeaways, Wendell, from that press conference. There are a lot of topics covered this morning.